Well, this is a very special occasion for me. This is the first time that I'm actually sitting opposite my own son. And he was the one that was responsible for bringing us to the truth in the first place. And since then, there have been some tumultuous times. 2,000 years ago, another father sent forth his son. And he sent him into this terrible world to face a terrible conflict. And if Jesus should have failed, then every single one of us would be lost. And every time a child is born in this world, it is subjected to the pressures of this world and the conflict that rages between good and evil. And I don't know how many tears there are in bottles of mothers and fathers, and sometimes of children because of parents, because someone has decided to follow a wrong path. And God, in His wisdom, allows us to build characters and to acquaint ourselves with the truth and to buy it or sell it individually. Because a father cannot program a son or a daughter, nor can a mother program a son or a daughter. They can only provide influences. And the Bible gives a number of promises. Train up a child in the way that it should go, and when he is old, he shall not depart from it, is one of the promises. But it's very nice to sit opposite you, Robert.
Likewise.
I didn't, for a long time, think this was going to be a possibility. Now, you know, when you start a family in this life, and normally when you start a family, like in our case, we were very young. And when we had this occasion that our first son was born, your brother, it was an amazing experience, and it was very hard for us because we were very poor at that stage. And it totally changed our lives, because there's a text in the Bible that says a woman shall be saved through childbearing. That doesn't mean that every woman has to have a child in order to be saved. What it basically means is that a child changes a person's character. You have to give up that which you normally did, your selfish attributes.
Yeah.
And you have to concentrate on taking care of this little bundle. And then the second child was born, your sister, Tanya. And I was quite excited that she was born, because I always wanted to pamper a little girl. And it was always nice as a father to sit with the little girl on your...
It's always a dream.
Yeah, you also want to have a little daughter, maybe?
I did. I actually wanted a daughter, and then my son came along, and now I now I can't imagine having a daughter. You know, and I'm so happy to have a son, but I always wanted a daughter, someone to spoil a bit.
Yes. Now, my daughter was very good at manipulating me. She had a very strange way of manipulating me. She would want to do something that was basically a little bit naughty, totally naughty. And she would say, "Can I do that?" And I would say, "No, that's not done." And then she would nag, and I would say, "No." Then she'd run up to me and give me a kiss and go and do it.
So that you can't do anything about it.
How do you react? Anyway, that was the second child. And then we went through quite a long period, because there are 4 years between each one of you, basically, right?
Yeah.
So that was quite hard, because that means there were 8 years between you and your oldest brother.
Yeah.
And you identified more with your sister.
Yes.
And then when your mother was pregnant with you, she got very ill. And she was more in hospital than she was at home. And she had constant problems with her lungs and constant fevers. And I had to take her to hospital many, many times, and they would put her on to...
Even many years after I was born, I recall.
Yes, many, many years. Your mother was often very sick. Your mother had a very, very hard pregnancy. And at one stage, the doctors came to us and said, we believe that the problem is the pregnancy, and we believe that there is sepsis in the uterus, and we recommend an immediate abortion. And your mother was lying in a hospital that didn't have a scan. And they just basically developed sonar scans, but they were only in specialized clinics. And there was a specialized clinic in the town. So we discussed it and said, no, we don't want to have an abortion until we know for sure that you are no longer alive. And so they said, well, you'll have to go to the clinic in town. But your mother was very sick and she had a very high fever. And I basically picked her up, carried her out of the hospital to my car, put her into the car, drove her to the clinic. And I looked at the clinic, and it was up a flight of stairs. And I thought to myself, this is not going to be easy. You know how people carry their brides across the threshold? I had to pick her up like this in my arms. And I walked up those stairs, and they did a scan. And there you were. You were about this size, and you were sucking your thumb.
Do you even have thumbs then?
Yes, you had. Wow. You were fully formed. You were just tiny. You were like Tom Thumb.
Sure.
And we looked at it, your mother and I, and there was no way we would allow an abortion. And so she struggled through that pregnancy, and eventually you were born.
Why did they say or my mom needs to get an abortion?
Because they thought the fetus was actually not alive.
Oh, okay.
And it had become septic.
They didn't have the scan. They didn't actually take the scan.
They didn't have a scan. They didn't know what was going on. So they just suggested at random that we do an immediate abortion to stop the sepsis and the fever and everything that went with it. And when you were born, you were basically an impossible child. You would scream, and you were always in a very fetal position. And you were very, very special, because we didn't know how to really deal with this.
Usually the third child is easier to deal with.
Yes, but we had actually made up our minds that we had a pair, and a pair was fine. That was enough. So you somehow came upon the scene without any planning. But your existence in our lives now totally challenged everything that we stood for, and totally challenged our lives. And your mother became a 24-hour nurse to you. And then all the dramas around the occult events in our home. And eventually you had so many issues and so many attacks and so many fevers. And always at the exact same time, I would feel that I was being strangled in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock at night. And then you would scream like crazy. And then we'd pick you up, and you would go into these fever cramps, and then you would get a high temperature and you would pass out. And we rushed to the hospital, and then you stayed there for a week or so, or longer. And every time it was touch and go. Where are you going to live? Where are you going to live? It was a very, very stressful situation. And eventually we sought help because we thought there was something supernatural happening in our house.
And you weren't in the faith that you are in now at that time?
No, I was an atheist.
Yeah.
I didn't believe anything. And so, well, the story is a long story, and I don't want to tell our conversion story. This is about you, and you knew nothing about that, right?
No.
Nothing. And so eventually what happened was we found the faith as a consequence of our search. And we became Seventh-day Adventists. The Bible says, here are they that keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. And you are the one who basically grew up in that faith. The other children were older already.
Yeah.
Right? Martin was 12. Tanya was 8.
When I was 3 or
when
3
you
or
were
4.
3
Yeah.
years. Martin was 12. Tanya was 8. You were just over 3. And you are the one who grew up with the Adventist lifestyle. The others had to change their lifestyles. And it was hard for them to change everything. Everything changed.
Yeah.
And the whole world view, sport, all of those issues that had to change. And then from Sunday to Sabbath. And
food.
It was very hard.
All of that, because they were entrenched in the meat diet, I guess, at that point.
Yes, and you grew up a total vegetarian.
Yeah.
Now, why are you the tallest of them all now?
Probably that. That's probably the reason.
Probably the reason, right? In any case, so there you were. You grew up an Adventist child, and you grew up in our home. And I was constantly engaged in work and evangelism. And how did that affect you, that I was away so much? And
well, firstly, go back to what you said before. Thank you for not giving up. Not giving up on me and taking my mom up the stairs and doing the scan, because now I'm here. But why, how did it affect me that you were away on what was it?
Campaigns
overseas, yeah. Well, it only started affecting me, I guess, later on. You know, you went on your trips, I guess, when I was around 7, 8 years old. Hey?
Yes.
That's when it started, 7, 8, 9. Look, I was very close with my mom. And I was very close with you as well, but you were mostly away. So I guess it affected me somewhat. You know, I probably needed a bit more time with my dad, you know, and you were preoccupied with more than just travels, you know. You were still working, I think, at the time for Stellenbosch. So you naturally didn't have enough, you know, a lot of time to spend with me. So, it affected me. I don't know how it affected me. I can't really recall, but I guess I gravitated towards my mom more because you were less around.
Now, when we were together, we often had many people over, and we had lots of Bible studies in our house with young people.
Yes, I recall.
There were always young people in our house doing Bible studies. And you basically grew up with the faith. And you actually were actually quite a strong little believer when you were young.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
Well, I would probably attribute it to friends. Yeah, I think there was a lot of peer pressure from a young age, you know.
But you were in a church school.
I was in a church school, but
Now, what is that but?
well, just looking at other members in our family and how they were also treated in those said schools, or in that said school, the influences weren't really good.
Your friends, were they largely from the faith, or were they largely not from the faith?
Back then, well, there were friends, some of my good friends, not in the faith, but mostly my friends were in the faith. And they were in the church.
And did they radiate towards the good side, or did they radiate towards the naughty side?
The naughty side, I would say. I know you tried to teach me values, and I know when I was, when old was I? 12 or 13, I started listening to rock music. And that was also my friends made me the tapes. It was tapes back then. And you weren't very happy about that because it obviously, it affects the mind.
And your
I wasn't happy when you threw my tapes away, I must say.
I threw your tapes away. No.
I wasn't happy.
Now, I remember that your older brother also went into music, and he started playing the guitar.
Yeah.
And he started playing very heavy rock kind of music.
Back then, I think it was AC/DC.
And
yeah.
Yes, and we had some books about rock music.
Mm.
And we tried everything to convince you guys that this was not the right way to go.
Mm.
And we gave him the books to read. Now, the interesting thing is, these books were supposed to expose the evil.
Mm.
But
it brought out the...
Yes. So everything that was evil was explained in there. And instead of turning to the good, it actually encouraged
them, yeah.
Encouraged them to go and become even worse.
Yeah.
And then you also went into that lifestyle.
Initially, when I was about 9 years old, I know he listened to bad music, and it was a fear factor for me back then. It actually scared me, the tones and the music and the voices. But I remember when we moved, maybe jumping ahead, but when we moved to our next house, the house after that, my friends from church, they teased me because I wasn't listening to the popular music at that time. And that was Def Leppard and Bon Jovi and all those old bands. And that I guess that hurt me in some way because, I felt left out. So I started listening to the music again, behind your back, and that actually had a big influence on me, the music.
And then you also started playing the guitar.
Yeah, I started in grade 8. Grade 8, I missed grade 8. In grade 9, I wanted to start playing, and the teacher said, you can't actually start now. And I said, please, let me start. And I showed him I could play. He said, you don't play so well, but okay, we'll take you on, in grade, grade 9? No? Yes, grade 9. And I started playing, and I played, and I practiced a lot because I started gravitating towards music and the feelings that it, gave you and all of that. And I started playing, yeah. And
and you became quite a good guitarist, and later you played for a band.
Played for a band, yes. And
the music was always of the best, right?
It was the best music you can find. It wasn't the best. It was, I went in sequences. So I started in punk music. It's softer music. It's not hard rock or anything. And we played that type of music in the band. And I was selected the singer and the rhythm guitarist. So, I started listening to more music, and then it went a bit heavier, bit of harder rock, bit of screaming and all of that. We started playing that in the band. And at that point, I my band members weren't in there was one of my friends, he was in the band, he was from the church, from our church in the faith, and the other two weren't. And we started obviously spending more time with them, and at the band practice, girls started joining and watching us play, and we used to act like the punk bands out there, and they used to do very interesting things, like jackass type of stuff, where you sit in a cart and you drive off a hill and you fall and you hurt each other.
Stupid things
that you hurt yourself, and you just became, and the regard for people became less because we used to, hurt other people as well.
How old were you then?
I was around 17, I think it was. I think you bought me the electric guitar.
I bought you an electric guitar?
I think you did, yeah.
It must have been after...
Or it was my mom, I can't remember, but it was a red, I think I still have it. I don't play it.
She must have told you that you may only play certain kinds of music on it.
I can't recall that, but I think it was very persistent. And at that point, I was so rebellious that I was quite rebellious at that point. And I think she just gave in, said, okay, you can get a guitar, but I think she also did mention, you're not going to play rock on this guitar or anything like that. I'll buy it for you, because all my friends had guitars. And I guess it also permeates to my parents in some degree. It's not always easy with a nagging kid.
All right. So tell me, did you at that stage know that you were doing wrong and knew what was the truth and just didn't care, or what happened?
Sure. So rebellion really kicked in at that age. So I mean, my upbringing was pretty strict, I would say. It's pretty strict. There were high values, and we kept the Sabbath. And although you explained all of that to me, I don't know if I actually grasped it, by the roots. Don't know if I actually did. So that caused rebellion, because I actually wanted to experience life. Yeah.
And we were trying to bring these values across all the time, and trying to say to you that, we have to be faithful to God. And when you look into the Bible, you have so many examples of parents speaking to their children, or King David speaking to Solomon.
Yes.
And God himself speaking to Solomon. And, God might not speak to you in an audible voice, but he speaks to you in that still small voice, which is called conscience. And you knew the truth, you knew the right way, but you hadn't bought it and made it your own, right?
No. I was spiraling at that point. I think I was too curious, because I came out of that type of environment. Isolated environment.
You wanted to investigate for yourself?
Yeah, and I wasn't even at the tip of the foot of the mountain yet in terms of experiencing what is out there, because I haven't. I mean, even my friends. Or this is now I made a lot of worldly friends at that point, and they at 16 they were allowed to drink at home, under supervision. So I occasionally went and, maybe had one or two, or, just experienced it with them. So I started feeling that the way I was treated at home was perhaps too harsh.
Too strict.
Too strict, yeah.
I remember that we, of course, were the very first ones almost that were totally vegan, vegetarian. And I realized that put a lot of peer pressure on all of you.
That was,
and the friends and the neighbors, they were in the church, but they were all eating the way the rest of the world eats in terms of meat consumption.
Correct.
And I remember the first time they convinced you that this diet was a load of nonsense, and you ate a piece of chicken. Can you remember that?
Okay, yes. So those are two occasions. So that was with a friend outside of the church. So I went to visit his house, and he made me a sandwich, and I saw chicken on the sandwich, and I said, I don't really eat this. I've never eaten this before. He said, try it, it's great. And I was 16, I think I was in school still. And I ate a piece. Well, I ate the whole sandwich, and it tasted interesting. It wasn't great, but you're referring to what happened after that.
Yes.
I'm assuming.
You got home and your whole body just burst into urticaria. You had all
Hives,
of
eh?
Hives, yes. All of these bumps on you.
Sure.
And you got the fright of your life.
Yeah, I did.
And
I was
I
dying.
asked you, what did you eat? And you said that you ate chicken. And I don't think I was as sympathetic.
No, I think you laughed.
I laughed.
Or-
I said, well, that serves you right.
Strict laughed or something, yeah.
Okay. And then the next occasion, it happened where?
So that was my stubbornness. Then my rebellion and my stubbornness was, I'm going to do it again. And I think, I can't remember where or when, but I think I went out with my friends and I ate chicken again. And lo and behold, the next day I had it again. The hives.
You were full of hives, full of bumps.
Yeah.
You looked like a sea monster.
And it was worse. I mean, it was actually quite serious. There was times where I couldn't breathe.
That actually tells you that if you can have such a strong reaction to just a little piece of chicken, how many toxins must there be in that to create such a massive reaction, right?
Yeah. I mean, could it happen other way around? If you hadn't eaten fruit, for instance, and you now eat fruit, could that happen as well? Unlikely.
Well, actually, in a way it did, because you get what you call a healing crisis.
Oh, yeah.
We were all big meat eaters before, which switched to a vegetarian diet. And
it's a shock
yes,
to the body.
Your body for the first time gets an opportunity to throw out toxins. And I actually got very sick. I got very high fevers, and the whole skin on my back just came off. And thereafter, I was a different person. I felt so much better than I'd ever felt. And you were going through the reverse process. You were going from a healthy lifestyle to a bad lifestyle.
Yeah.
And then, Robert, something dramatic happened when you were 19 years old.
Yes.
You were in this rebellious stage. Your mother's knees were totally destroyed. My knees were totally shot, because when God gives you rebellious children, then He makes sure that you have knees so that you can stay on them and beg God to help you in these situations.
Yeah.
You know the truth, and they just don't want to buy the truth. Off they go. It is the most heart-rending situation that you can have.
Yeah, I was actually in a mess at that point, because I studied at 18U, and my mom also left. I think you went overseas, and I stayed with my brother for a year. And I went to college in Northling College. And when I failed, I think I failed my second year. I didn't finish the second year, got a certificate, came back home. You were home, or both of you were home. And then I just sat at home and I did nothing. And that's where I even thought of making a career out of music and even going overseas. At that point, we played live shows in the middle of the forest, where everyone is drinking, and it's not a good vibe. And at that point, you gave me the ultimatum, I think, when I was 18, 19, that I need to study something real or find a place. you gave me that. Well, you had to at that point. I completely agree that that was the right thing to do. But yeah, so back to your question, when we were band practicing, I was 19, and at that point we were quite deep into the
Heavy music.
heavy music. Yeah, I was at that point, screaming, and we had, I was the lead singer, and we had a bit of popularity, I guess, a little bit. Anyway, so it was that one evening we were band practicing, I think, for a show, and a lot of people were watching, and I was performing, obviously, going overboard, and I was jumping up and down, and I was screaming, and my voice was, sore from all the screaming, and something must have happened inside, in my heart, and I just felt really something wasn't right, and I was tired, and I was looking at everyone, and everything was sort of dimmed, and I said to them, guys, let's go home. And I was the driver for all of them, for the four of us. I took them all home with this. I could feel my heart. So at that point, at the band practice still, I felt my heart going out of beat, out of sync. And I mentioned it to my friends that I felt exhausted and fatigued. And our lead guitarist said that it happens to him all the time. It's nothing to be worried about. So I said, that's fine, but I still felt, I said, guys, let's go, because something isn't right. And they said, okay, well, let's go. And I took them home. I remember I probably drove about 15, 20 kilometers. And then I got home, and I was in a bit of a state. And I remember seeing you, and my mom was, I think, in the room, and both of you came because I said something isn't right, and I think you said, go take a shower, or my mom said, go take a shower.
All right, I'll tell you what happened, because you probably can't remember
Yeah, I can't remember
everything.
all the details.
What happened was you came home and you said you're not feeling well, and you were panicky about it. And you had an arrhythmia. And I said to you, take a shower, you'll feel better. And then you took a shower and you went to bed. We put you in bed, and we watched over you, and then you said, you have a pain. And the pain was down your left arm.
Yeah. It wasn't excruciating, though. It was just
It
numb,
was just
a little bit numb.
pain. So I had taught many courses on it, being, the professor of medical physiology. And I asked you about the symptoms and exactly where you felt the pain in your arm.
Don't recall, yeah.
And you showed me the spots where you felt the pain in your arm. And I said, get up, come, quick. And I knew that were the symptoms of a heart attack, but you were 19 years old.
Yeah.
This was very strange. And I rushed you to the car and put you in the car. And at that very moment, someone came along and wanted to borrow a wheelbarrow from me. Now, we had a medical emergency.
Yeah.
And this person was parked behind me and insisted on a wheelbarrow. I nearly drove over him. Got rid of him, and your mother somehow had to take care of the wheelbarrow, and so she couldn't come along.
Yeah.
She had to follow afterwards. And I rushed you to the hospital, and you were complaining, and it got worse and worse as we were driving.
Didn't I go blind at some point?
Yes, you said you couldn't see anymore.
Yeah.
And then you went totally stiff, and you basically died in my car. You were physically dead in my car.
Flatlined, yeah.
I was stressed beyond measure. I rushed to that hospital like I've never rushed in a car before. And the emergency door was closed. I nearly took it off its hinges and rushed you in. And there was a young doctor in there. And I said, he's just had a heart attack and he stopped breathing. And you were basically dead. And so they rushed you in and put you on the table, and they brought the machine to shock your heart back into activity. And they said that I should go out, but they didn't have enough staff. So they asked me to come back in to assist.
Because I was shaking, I assume.
Yes, and the shocking. They first tried to get a tube down, and they put the tube down to get oxygen into your lungs. And then they shocked you. And you reacted, but you reacted violently, and you know, you're very strong. I don't know whether you know that you're very strong. You ripped this thing out of your mouth, and you tore a lot of tissue in there, and then the blood just came running out of your mouth. It was a total mess. And at that moment, your mother arrived. And so she was not in a good state. So they chased her out and chased me out with her. But then they couldn't handle you because you were so strong. So they brought me back in, and then you passed out again. And they shocked you a second time. And you jerked, but you wouldn't come back. Then they shocked you a third time. And then you woke up.
Was I fully awake at that point?
Fully awake.
Because I remember, I think in between the shocks, I woke up.
You woke up once when you pulled out the thing.
Yes. That's where I saw my mom.
Yes.
And you, just for a second.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
And then they put you into ICU. And you were absolutely fine. Normal. Now, that's not what you are like if you had a heart attack. So this was not a heart attack. What was it?
Yeah.
It was something totally different. And what they discovered was that you had an extra nerve. It's called Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome.
Yeah.
And this nerve would take over the rhythm of your heart and send your heart into fibrillation. Then there's no oxygen to the brain. And then you basically died. It stopped beating altogether.
Now, was that due to, I mean, did that occurrence happen due to the physical exercise I was doing while band practice?
One of the symptoms of Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome is that those who have it, who have this extra nerve, grow up absolutely normally. And then when they reach the 20s, 19, 20, and you were 19, 19, 20, or 21, 22, round about there, then that nerve kicks in and they can die. Normally they die. And then you don't know why they died. You think it was a heart attack. It's quite a rare syndrome. It's not a genetic defect, as it were. It's just an extra nerve in the heart. So when they discovered that, they had to find an electrocardiologist who could treat that syndrome. But there were only 2 in the country, and both of them were on a congress in the United States.
Oh, I remember, yeah.
Yes, so they weren't there. So now what? They were only coming back in a week. And so the hospital said that we must take you home.
Yeah.
And we must monitor you 24/7. And at the slightest chance of arrhythmia, we would have to rush you into the hospital in case they had to defibrillate you again. And so we made a bed next to our bed, and you slept next to me. Remember that?
I do.
And every 5 minutes in the night, I would look, and it reminded me when you were a baby. And, you know, in circumstances like that, you pray like crazy. And you were not in a good place. You were doing everything that was wrong. I know that when you are in that band situation, then the drink comes in, and then the drugs come in, and I don't want to go into all the details, but you were a naughty boy.
Yeah, I was.
I want to read you a verse that sustained us. It's in Isaiah chapter 49. And it's verse 24 and 25. And your mother and I claimed this promise so many times. Shall the prey be taken from the mighty, or the lawful captive delivered? But thus says the Lord, even the captives of the mighty shall be taken away, and the prey of the terrible shall be delivered. For I will contend with him that contends with thee, and I will save thy children. So to all those parents who write to us so regularly, and all those parents out there that are desperate and want to give up when their children go astray, God has ways and means to bring them back. Now, this was a very bad occasion. I mean, you can't imagine much worse happening.
Yeah.
And then for that 1 week, we watched you 24/7. And finally, that specialist arrived from overseas, and that appointment was made at the heart clinic, and you went in for that operation. It's an 8-hour operation.
It was a very tricky operation.
It's a very tricky operation. They go in through the groin.
Yeah, the vena cava and the aorta.
Yes, they go up into the heart. Then they have to go through the heart chamber to the other heart chamber. And then they have to go down, and they have to find that nerve in the ventricle or wherever it is. And they found that nerve. Then they put a probe all through those veins. They put it into that nerve, and they test the nerve. In other words, they stimulate the nerve to see what it does. And it created a heartbeat of somewhere around 300 beats per minute. That's fibrillation.
That's where I was, hey?
That's where you were.
Yeah.
So in other words, the heart is beating so fast that the blood cannot pump through the arteries. So you get no blood to the brain, and you get no blood to the rest of your body.
So is it not a miracle that didn't damage my heart?
You could have had a serious damage.
Or brain damage after 5
And you could have had brain damage.
I don't know if I have brain damage, but I doubt it.
Well, you're still here and you're talking. And you did go back to study, and you did get a degree in electrical engineering, and you did get a degree in commerce, BCom.
Correct.
So your brain seems to be okay. I don't know about the rest.
It's fine.
But in any case, they stimulated that nerve, and then they take a laser beam and they destroy that nerve.
Yeah.
And then your normal pathways take over, and then you're back to normal. So basically after that, they must have, when they burn that nerve, it puts some pressure on the heart.
Yeah.
And it takes time to recover, but otherwise you're perfectly normal after that.
With the life that I lived after that, which wasn't a good life, there was a lot of anxiety, you know. I think the heart obviously took some strain because I didn't live the best life, and a lot of times it felt like the heart was acting up again. And I believe God.
You only ate properly if you visited us.
Yeah, I would say so.
Otherwise, you ate what?
Lived on braais and...
So barbecues.
Barbecues, yeah. And
so you totally left the lifestyle behind you.
I did. I even went to the doctor after my surgery. Right after my surgery, I was still in the hospital, and I asked him if smoking affects what I have. And he said, "You shouldn't smoke." And I said to him, "That's not what I asked. I asked, would smoking affect what I had?" And he looked at me, and he knew what I was referring to, and he said, "No, it won't." I said, "Thank you." And I went outside and I had a cigarette at the hospital.
at the hospital. He was stubborn.
Can't believe it, yeah.
Did it make you think?
A year and a half later, it did. Not at that point. I was beyond. I can't recall. I must have contemplated over what the occurrence, but not, after what I told you now about the doctor and the cigarette, I doubt it because I didn't care.
You didn't care?
I just wanted to go back to what I enjoyed doing at that point.
You had so many conversations with us, but particularly with your mother. You were very close to your mother. And your mother kept talking to you about music and about health, and you just kept on rebelling.
But the one thing I did was I was always very honest with her. So whatever I did, and I didn't do very good things, but I always used to sit there and tell her everything that I did the previous evening, everything.
And how did she react?
She was quite gentle. She approached it quite nicely, and she would ask questions. Why? Why would you do that? This hurts your body, this and that. And I listened. I remember that was around, 1920s. Probably one of my worst times was between 19 and 23, 24. So that's the area. But yeah, she was very, forgiving and very helpful. She wanted to help, but she wasn't forceful. She wasn't. She reprimanded in a nice way. Yeah.
And I wasn't quite so kind, or
no, I wouldn't tell you what I did the previous evening, or
you wouldn't tell me.
No,
okay.
It wasn't. Yeah, I mean, you had a way of.
She would give me a filtered version.
Yeah. Oh, is that so?
Yes.
Okay.
She would give me the filtered version because she wanted to protect you, and but
both ways. Protect me from heavy reprimand, but also from what I did.
Yes, and so she gave me enough that I would be forced back onto my knees, but not enough for me to get all hyped up about it.
But how was that difficult for you at that point, at that age, where you can't forcibly, remove certain things in my life or prohibit me from doing things?
What I realized is you can know the truth. You can live the truth. You can be concerned for others. But there's a particular bond with your own family, and it's a terrible dichotomy going on in your head. If your own children know the truth but refuse to live it. And life is so unpredictable. You were nearly dead. In fact, you died in my car.
And I didn't see any lights. Dead. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary during that time.
No, you
just
didn't know anything. And you never went to heaven, and you never went to hell, because that's a lot of nonsense.
I really did not.
You knew nothing. You woke up and you were absolutely, what am I doing here?
Yeah, no idea.
And you wanted to get up and walk out. And they said, no, you just had a heart attack. But it wasn't a heart attack. You know what? The Bible is full of stories like that. And David and Solomon is such a beautiful example in the Bible. He had everything, Solomon.
Yeah.
He had the whole truth. He was talking to God on a one-to-one basis. He was...
Yeah, he was the wisest.
He was the wisest of them all. It was just amazing. And look what happened to him. And when it comes to the conclusion of the matter, it is fear God and keep his commandments. This is the whole duty of man.
Yeah.
So you knew all of those things, but you wouldn't come back. And here's the one that brought us into the truth, and he's in the world. Now, your older brother, Martin, he also went into the world.
took a different course, but it was
different.
the rebellion as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's also highly educated and a medical doctor today and all of these things. And he does know the truth and everything that is involved with it. But to actually embrace it in its entirety, or just knowing it and being involved with it, is a big, big difference.
Yeah.
And there you were, and you were going through this rebellious stage. And how many years did it last?
Lasted, so I was baptized at the age of 21.
Yes, I remember. Who baptized you?
It was a grumpy old man.
Are you referring to me as a grumpy old man?
I'm just kidding, but yes, you baptized me.
Okay, now how do you think I felt knowing that you were so rebellious, and here you come to the point where you said you want to be baptized?
The prodigal son comes to mind at that point.
You were a prodigal son that came home.
Yeah.
But you only stayed a short while and you made a U-turn and you went back.
Yeah.
Why?
Again, my friends, my whole life, with you traveling, and it's not your fault or my mom's fault, but I was alone. I was living in Somerset West. I was studying. We didn't have a lot of money. I mean, I got a allowance to pay bills and, certain things. I think you still paid for my rent and all of that, and I got a certain payment.
But in this country of ours, it's pretty normal for young people who are at university age to be separated from your family. Your mother had to leave home when she was 17, and she was basically dumped into the world.
Yeah.
So in this milieu, when you reach that age, off you go. You go to a university, sometimes you go to hostels.
Yeah.
And we arranged that you could stay with very faithful people at that stage. And you had your own little flat, and we supported you. But yes, you had the opportunity to work with the church people, but you chose the others, right?
I did. But keeping in mind, I only started, rebelling at the age of really 18. And the band aside, I mean, that was a side thing. It wasn't real rebellion. It was 18 and 19, I had my heart attack, and 20, I started experimenting, and 21, I said, I need to stop this. I need to, I knew what the truth was, and I didn't.
Did you pray?
I didn't pray as earnestly as I do now. I didn't have that connection. I thought it was what I had was actually a very superficial type of faith at that point. And my friends from church, they were also baptized, but we all were in the same clique, and this clique, my church friends, we diffused into the world, and we had a lot of friends in the world, and that peer pressure caused all of us to stand together and to move together. So for me to fall out of my church friends and then lose my worldly friends was too much to bear, I guess. So I remember after getting baptized, one of my friends, Jeremy Sturley, actually, we went and we conducted Bible studies for our friends in the world. Real Bible studies. We had them noted, and we had markers everywhere in the Bible, and we used to go from from paragraph to paragraph and from book to book, and we gave thorough Bible studies. And then after that, it didn't settle. It never settled, I guess is what happened. And I remember my mom came to visit. She visited when she could, and I still said to her, listen, I'm going out with my friends. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to, have bad conversations, all of that. I'm just going to go out and I'm just going to hear this band play or whatever at this small bar. And she said, you must watch out, because that's where, God, cannot help you. He cannot abide with you really in that, or abide is the wrong word. But that's where Satan and his angels are. And as I walked in there, I had been, I hadn't been out in that type of scene for a long time. So it was really strange walking in there. And I walked in and I felt out of place. And I didn't do anything that night, of course. But when I walked out, something strange happened. I don't know, it was maybe just a coincidence, but my car alarm went off and nothing I did could put it off. Nothing. It took me about an hour and a half, and all of a sudden it went off. I could get into my car, and I was a bit bewildered, and I drove home and I told my mom about it, and she said, well, that does sound strange, and I said it was weird being there. I could feel the presence of, evil. And that carried on, but then you start exploring a bit further. Like, that was okay. It wasn't that bad. And I explored a bit further, but I never went out clubbing or anything like that with my friends. So my best friend who he wasn't in our church, but he was one of my best friends. He came over and he said, listen, we're going to this party. And I said to him, I can't go. I can't go. I've chosen a life that I want to lead. And I saw on his face, he was quite sad, because that look was almost like he's losing me forever. You understand? So I was looking at him and I could see, he said, I'm going. And I didn't understand what that meant, but I felt I lost him. So then I decided, right there and then, I think I decided, I can't do this. It's too difficult. I'm going to lose friends. I'm going to lose all my friends, and I'm going to be alone. And my parents were far away. Probably at that point, I think you lived in the Karoo, not the Karoo, Riversdale.
Yes, that's about 350 kilometers away from where you were.
Yeah. So I still had my church friends, but they were also exploring, in the world. So it was just too hard, to do it on my own. So and I didn't have the faith to sustain me at that point.
And so you went back into the world.
Yeah.
Worse than ever.
Worse than ever. That was the worst. Between 21 and 32. It's a long time. So at 21, 22, 23, I escalated, I explored a lot of avenues that I never should have, and I met my wife actually at the age of 22. But at that point, we were in the same type of scene. We enjoyed going out, and that scene became so regular. It was weekly, sometimes twice a week. We go out and party, if you want to call it that, and it became harder. And then, not being invested with someone in the church, or with, I'm not saying she does not have values. She had a lot of values, but it's different to what I knew or how I was raised. So we walked that path, and I loved it, a lot, and I still do, but we walked that path, and then at the age of 30, it was myself and my wife and her sister. We drove to a party. We were living in Stellenbosch back then, and it was now 9 years ago. We went to a party, and we had a few drinks, nothing special, but we drove back, and it was raining, and my sister-in-law, she was driving, and she just moved she just went off the road because it was raining and it was difficult to see, and she pulled it back, and the whole car wobbled, and she couldn't secure the steering wheel, and she was making her way towards a wall. There was a wall on the side of the road, but it was quite a high piece of curb, and I pulled it back so that we won't hit it at 110 kilometers per hour. So we rolled the car, and that was intense. I still remember falling. It rolled on my side first, and we rolled more than 5-6 times, and we hit the barrier, and we rolled on top of the barrier, and it was on the roof, and they were unscathed. They nothing happened to them. They maybe a few marks here and there, but they got out of the car. They crawled out, and I was stuck inside. And at that point,
Didn't your foot go right through the windscreen?
Yes, somehow my foot went out the windscreen and it got stuck. So I couldn't get out. It got stuck. The whole weight of the car was on my foot. So yeah, I didn't pray or any of that. I wasn't in that mindset at all. That whole decade was a disaster, I guess, if you look at it from that point. But I got out. I had a few bruises and I had torn ligaments, and I didn't break anything. But the point is that at that point, I was so deep entrenched, and I lost my job. I wasn't fired, but I was retrenched from Mixit, the social media platform, and I was depressed. And I spoke to you a lot, and to my mom a lot, to my parents, and at that point again, I decided maybe, this is too tough. I need to get back to God. And so that's my second time when I decided. And I started reading, and I started watching videos, and I got teased a lot. And I just shaked it off, but I got teased a lot, and even by family, not direct blood family, but yeah. And then again, it was just too much pressure. We had so many friends, 40, 50 friends, where we, and I had at that point, almost a wife as well. I'm still dating her, obviously. And I struggled. And it was more like an exploration, but I kept it at arm's length, the faith. And because I didn't jump in, because I didn't go all the way, Satan pulled me away again.
And then you got married?
Then I got married at 32, yes.
And then your son was born?
He was born at 35, when I was 35. I think that's exactly the same age you were when I was born.
You're right. So you were 35 years old.
Yeah.
You were living in the world. You were doing all of this music in bands and all of these things, living a wrong lifestyle, and then your son was born. Was he a very easy son?
He was a different kettle of fish. He was very difficult to I didn't understand how to manage him or how to help him almost, because my wife was highly depressed because he was very colic, 5 months of screaming 8 hours a day, if not longer. And we took turns. Well, not really. We actually we slept at the bottom on the couches and him in the middle, and we had to wake up every hour. And at one point, it's almost similar to what happened to me, I guess, but he just went berserk, and I couldn't get him to stop screaming, and he was turning blue almost, and I jumped in the car, just rushed him to hospital, and they calmed him down. And I thought, I don't want to live this type of life almost. I didn't treat him like a dad should be treating him. I still remember, he frustrated me so. I didn't know, I had no connection with him either. And I can't speak for my wife, but both of us struggled with that connection. So at that point, I remember prior to that, you still, I think my mom still gave me Patriarchs and Prophets, a Spirit of Prophecy book, and I read it every night. I read it, but I had no understanding. I read it, but I read about the temple and the gold, and I had understand none of the symbolic gestures. I had no idea. And just to jump ahead quick, but after conversion, it all opened up.
But what created the conversion?
Yes, the conversion was I had nowhere else to go. It's either I go to God, or it's either I run away from my family, so to speak, or I find a solution. So the solution was, let's see what God has to say.
Whether God can help you out of your
Whether God can
dilemma.
help me out of this, because at that point I had a decent job. I'm still in with the same company, but that was also completely deteriorating. My work, I couldn't sleep, and because I've lived this life, I was heavily impatient. I couldn't deal with this kid. I just wanted to get him out of the way, and I didn't want to actually feel like that. I wanted to help him. So I thought, maybe from everything that I've learned over the years, from you and from my mom and from the church, I guess, and from just being embedded growing up, I decided somehow this has to work. So I went on my knees and I said, okay, I'll give you my life if you help me. Yeah. And maybe a few days after that, it felt like a burden was lifted. And I tried understanding it, and I think I spoke to you about it a bit. And interestingly enough, through the years, during that time, I think 2015, you actually phoned me and told me about events happening, the Laudato Si and the encyclical and all of that. And I was semi-interested, keen to hear it. I was okay. I wasn't completely rebellious, in that period. I still, in my inebriated state at times, I would preach to my friends and they would enjoy it because I was in the same bubble.
You were still in the same bubble, but you were climbing out of it.
Yeah, they listened, and it was interesting, but obviously it faded because that's not how you preach the gospel. But yeah, so at that point, when I spoke to you again, then because I gave my life to God, things started making sense, and this was interesting, and it was scary, but it was also enlightening and interesting. So I decided to arm myself with knowledge, and that's what I did. Yeah.
And now you're back to where you were when you were a child.
Yes.
You're eating like you ate, like you did before. Was it because we forced you, or because you discovered that this was the best way?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's always difficult to say this, but nothing, and you tried and you said the right things, but nothing you said actually got me into this life. It's something that only the Holy Spirit can do for me.
So the only thing that converted you was not pressure from anybody.
No.
But a longing to find peace that you thought that you would only find with God.
Mm.
And then you discovered all the things that you basically knew but rejected.
Yeah. But it exploded.
It exploded and you accepted it all.
Yeah, accepted it all. Yeah.
And was it easy on your family, or did it make matters easier or make it worse?
It made, well, I had an inner peace. So that's what kept me going. There were times when I said to myself and to God, I'm going to run again. Like I did in the past with the peer pressure. This was tough. I mean, my wife is a Christian, and she's a loving mother and wife, but my faith is different to all the others. I want to keep the commandments, but that's not the first step, and that's never how I experienced it, because I didn't keep the commandments while searching for Him. I searched for Him, and then as a result kept the commandments.
So you didn't keep the commandments to stay on His good side?
No, not at all. I was still smoking a cigarette while reading the Bible. And after a while, I was reading the Bible and the cigarette wasn't in the hand.
So who changed you? God changed you.
God changed me, yeah.
So sometimes, no matter how much preaching you receive, it is something that is totally up to God.
Yeah.
To change.
As Jesus said to Nicodemus,
so
the wind blows and you don't know where it comes from, you don't know where it goes. That's how it felt.
Now, I'll tell you from my perspective, we prayed so much for you and claimed these promises that we find in the Bible. And we often said to God, this is the one who brought us into the church, so He stay behind. I don't want to go to heaven with any of my children not being there. You're all absolutely the same to me in terms of that. But there was this special relationship because of all that we went through with you. And was this one going to stay behind? It was very, very hard.
Yeah.
But we kept on praying. And I want to encourage people, don't give up. Don't ever give up. No matter how rebellious your child is, no matter what happens, just never, ever give up. Just keep on praying. And there was no direct influence on me. And if it's like father, like son today, because you believe exactly like I believe, I am so astounded that you should believe exactly like we believe. Not because of any indoctrination, because you refuse to accept it anyway.
Yeah.
But because God led you to it.
Then
you started reading the Bible and you started reading the spirit of prophecy, and it became food for you, right?
I had to experience it for myself and argue certain points. And I remember you and I had points that we argued at times. And
did Solomon go astray?
He did.
He went astray, right?
Yeah.
Did he come back?
Yes.
Yes, he came back.
Yeah.
In the nick of time.
Yeah.
Now, I believe that we are living very close to the end of all things. And I believe God wants to reach out to humanity with a mighty message and call them back. There isn't much time left.
No.
And this Sabbath, you gave many Bible studies and you gave many Sabbath school studies, but this will be the first time in your entire life that you'll actually be preaching a sermon. Is that right?
That's correct.
How do you feel about that?
Initially, when I was asked to preach, I was very nervous because it's just another milestone. Bible study is not exactly, it's the same type of thing, but a sermon is something, that I've always aspired to, but I never thought that I would ever get there. And so it's a big honor to do that for God, to preach a message that is very important for this end time.
Now, this little boy of yours, how old is he now?
he's almost, well, he's 4. He's turning
He's 4.
5
He's going
in
to
April.
turn 5, right?
Mm,
And he was a very complex little boy.
very. Still.
And now you have this absolute close relationship with him.
Very, yeah.
And do you often think about it that this little boy brought you back to the faith?
I do. Every day, yeah.
And how would you feel if you saw him go astray?
Oh, it would be calamity.
It would be a calamity,
Yes.
right? And how would you feel if you know that there's nothing you can do to prevent it except nurture him with the truth and hope that he retains it?
That's very, that's very, very difficult.
Now, how do you think God feels? I mean, look at this
I'm guessing
picture.
that's how you felt as well, or feel.
That's what I'm trying to get across.
Yeah.
Now, here is this famous picture in a modern form of how God feels. Imagine that everybody down here is a child of God.
Mm.
And most of the world has gone astray and is living the way you lived.
Yeah.
Imagine how he feels.
Can't imagine it, because his love is
way higher
unimaginable.
than our
Yeah.
love. How would you feel if something happened to your little boy now? I mean, I watch you and I watch how close you are to him, and I thank God for that child. You had the heart issue. You rolled that car. You could have been dead. You had other serious operations. I remember that operation on your jaw. That was a horrendous operation.
I was back at your bedside.
Back at my bedside, watching over you. And somehow you were the one that brought us into the church, and somehow God in his mercy got you back.
Mm.
And of course, I pray that you will stay back.
I can't even imagine going back to that life.
You don't want to. And you came out of the city.
Yeah.
Located back to the country.
Or to the country, not even back.
Yes, to the country. And you left that entire life behind.
Yeah, that was a step of faith, which I'm happy to God for.
And it's your intention to not only give your life to God as you have done, but it is your intention to go and preach for God, isn't it?
And that's been hard, because I'm not good. I haven't been good, or that's what I thought, in front of crowds and all of that type of stuff. So I decided when I gave my testimony 2 years ago that I'm just going to say yes. And it was a struggle. And the first time I had to do a Bible study, it was one day in the Bible study. I said, just do one day. Oh, I couldn't even imagine doing one day. So I did one day. And then I did 2 days. And then then I gave a full Bible study, and I couldn't believe it. So he meets you where you are, and he lifts you up.
Okay, what would be your final words of encouragement to young people who are in the same situation as you were in?
I always say, just trust in him. Trust him, even if you don't know him and you don't understand where your life would be after should you make a commitment to him. Just ask him just trust him and have faith that your life will be better. You will have trials, but you'll have a new life, and he'll change you. He'll make you a better and a new person.
And once he's done that, once he's brought about this transformation, can you imagine going back to the old life?
No.
And yet so many times you went back, right? But
yes.
This time something changed.
Yeah.
It solidified.
Yeah. It's difficult to pinpoint as to why. Well, Not really. I think had my son not been born, things could have been different. I really do. I think God also he also obviously knocks. You need to open the door.
So when the Bible says a woman shall be saved through childbearing, can I say that a son can also be saved through childbearing?
Very much so.
Well, Robert, I'm so grateful to God that you are sitting here today and believe, not because we drummed it into you, but because you discovered it again for yourself.
Mm.
And when you really asked for help, you realized that God is a God that keeps his promises.
Yeah.
And that means that he will keep his promises for the entire time that is ahead of us as well.
Mm.
And we're heading for tough times, right?
We are.
And may God use you in the future to bring truth to people. And may we never give up on our children. And may we never give up on humanity. Humanity is in the same boat that he was in. Humanity is often in a worse boat than he was in. But if we pray and we seek God, then he will help us.
We'll deliver on his word.
Robert, I believe that prayer brought you back to where you should be. And not because you have to now, but because you want to.
Mm. And I'm grateful for all those prayers, because I know intercessory prayers are vital. It's powerful.
Yes. So I would want to pray for you, for us, and for all parents and all children out there that are struggling with similar issues. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, you have told us that the road to heaven is a rocky road. It's not a broad highway. And it says, seek and you shall find. But it also says that few find it. And the reason why few find it is because they do not seek. And so often it is necessary for you to create circumstances in our lives so that we will seek. And if a heart issue doesn't work and a rolling car doesn't work and none of these things work, then sometimes you create situations that make us so desperate that we cry out to you. May many people in the desperate times that we live in cry out to you now. And it is my prayer, as it has been from the beginning, not only to save this son of mine for all eternity, but all my children. And by extrapolation, all the children out there in the world that are without God and know not what it means to discover the love of God. That hand reaching down from heaven is always willing to take hold of us and pull us out of the quagmire that we have become entangled in. Keep our children safe, and not only that, Lord, but use them. Use them to further your gospel and to bring many to the point of decision, that your house may be full, is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.